When you think about how your life's going to go, typically you think about marriage, kids, and your career. When it comes to marriage, though, you think about how it's going to happen. Will you live together before you're engaged or after you're engaged? Today, I'd like to thank the School Board Corporation for listening to me speak about the importance of informing the younger generation on why cohabitation before marriage will ultimately lead to divorce. This is such an important subject, especially for high school aged adults, because this is the young and in love phase where they typically make these sort of rash decisions. If we can help them in any way, it would be by not only having parents in the churches informing them, but by incorporating it into our school system as well. Throughout young adulthood, these children are noticing the rise in the rate of parental divorces or have personally been attributed to cohabitating couples who never married in general. As shown on this chart, according to Marilyn Gardner, between 1960 and 2000, the number of cohabitating couples increased tenfold, soaring from 430,000 to more than 5 million. As many as half of these couples eventually divorced or they never married at all. Compared to where our parents and our grandparents grew up and how society was then, living together before marriage skyrocketed completely. Cohabitation before marriage was never really a norm before recently. Also, as you can agree, the age of violence has definitely picked up as well. Which this leads to another point as to how living together before marriage can lead to what Rutgers University in New Jersey says can also increase women's and men's risk of domestic violence and children's chances of physical or sexual abuse. According to Jennifer Morse, no one can simulate self-giving. Half a commitment is no commitment at all. Cohabitating couples are likely to have one foot out the door throughout the relationship. The members of a cohabitating couple practice holding back on one another, and they rehearse not trusting one another. As teenagers, these young students are compromised. No matter how many no-bullying convocations there are, and no matter the different disciplines set in place at the schools, there are still going to be acts of bullying and acts of dramatized rumors. This is where these teenagers start to develop their ideas of not being able to trust anybody. When cohabitating with a significant other before marriage, you are practicing the action of one foot out the door. These teenagers are wanting to rebel and wanting to live their own lives, but if we're not informing them of these precautions of cohabitation, then they'll just continue to practice these things. This is just another reason as to why living together before marriage cannot work, because these teenagers haven't been able to grow within themselves enough to be able to fully commit to another human being. If they can't commit to themselves, how are they expected to commit to somebody else? This is what researchers called sliding and not deciding. What that basically means is you go from dating to sleeping at each other's houses every now and then to sleeping at each other's houses all the time to eventually moving in together. But these younger generation couples bypass talking in general, like about why they want to live together and what does this even mean. This is according to Meg Jay of the New York Times. Because students are only hearing how living together before marriage is bad from parents and their churches, if they even attend church at all, which is a common thread amongst younger generations today too, they are not taking it seriously, especially because it's now become a norm to come from broken homes. If more institutions could incorporate this into their repertoire, we could possibly change these divorce rates from a higher standing to a significantly lower one. Another reason as to why divorce rates have risen is because before today's generation of not needing to fit the mold of gender roles, there were well-defined gender roles, meaning men worked and provided for the family while the women stayed home with all the children. In today's generation, according to historian Stephanie Kuntz, people come to marriage with independent aspirations, and much greater ideas of equality. According to this chart shown, it will take the United States, in order to obtain economic gender equality, it'll be about 50 years in order for us to become technically completely equal on the gender scale. Because of this need of equality practiced in today's society and in the schools, everyone is more expectant of their needs to be fulfilled. However, when it comes to living with a significant other before marriage, they aren't looking at the financial picture. As stated by Neil Shaw, high unemployment, stagnant incomes, and rising poverty likely also fuel instability in Americans' relationships, making cohabiting much harder. In a number of schools across the country, incomes, unemployment rates, and poverty lines are discussed through financial classes, and the physical and mental aspects are discussed in health classes. The topic of living with another person could easily be contributed to these classes just to show that these young adults in high school are not ready to live with another person, mentally, physically, or financially. In conclusion, informing the high school student body of the possibilities and dangers of cohabitation before marriage would benefit them in the long run. After all, high school is the stepping stone that's used to help prepare a young adult for the real world. By utilizing the health classes and the financial classes within the high school to warn students about the dangers, mentally, physically, and financially, of living with a significant other before marriage, we would be able to implement early on how much more sound their lives will be if they aren't in a rush after high school. Thank you all for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I urge that you all take this step into furthering the after high school education needed to help these students in the outside world.